question is, what is original?
Hello everyone, we are here at Swiss Wax headquarters with Markus. Markus approached me about our first video, original versus authentic, and he told me, Julio, what about modifications? So Markus, what about modifications?
Well, for me, modifications is something that you add from your personality into the car. So that is something you need to do carefully, because you always need to think about, okay, what is it that I want, that I'm loving? When you are driving the car regularly, I'm driving the car 7,000, 8,000 kilometers per year, so it's a daily driver. It's a 50 years old car. And for me, it's also adding something to the history of the car, which I think is also, for me, that's my perceived value. And that's also, everybody's talking about values, authentic, restoration, matching numbers, all these buzzwords. But it's always about, what is the value of the car?
So are we talking about monetary value, sentimental value, performance value, for example, usability?
Mm-hmm. But that's exactly what it is. It's very subjective. What is the value? Keeping a matching numbers car for the museum or the next owner paying you a premium price or paying you more than you have paid, that's one thing. For me, the value is using the car as often as I want to, because I'm driving the car then 80, 100 kilometers per day, driving to the office, back and forth, bringing my kids to the school, to the kindergarten, the daycare, and they love it. And that's the value that I get from the car, because I'm using it regularly. So I'm also interpreting the usage of the car maybe totally different than somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there any limit that you will put in a modification of a car?
For me personally, yes, because I need to feel great when I'm looking at the car. So my personal limit is I'm not using it as a track tool, for example. I'm going to the track next day, but I'm having a track car there, renting that just for this purpose. So for me, a car is always purpose-driven. I have a car going with family on vacation, and I have this car that I love to drive from spring to autumn nearly daily. But
can we say this modification with a purpose?
Yeah, well, sometimes you need to have modifications.
When do you think you need modifications? I mean,
when the spare part is not available.
For example, okay.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
I also now have a new ignition that's electronically steered, my ignition, which is much better for the engine. I don't have any backfires, misfires of the engine. The first backfire of the engine costs me 3,000 Swiss francs. So I also needed a new ignition system, and the technician told me, look, let's change that and upgrade that, because it solves so many problems for you, because you're using the car so often. And these are sometimes modifications I think you need to take into consideration when you're using the car regularly. If you're talking about original, authentic things, or as it was in the 50s, then probably it's the wrong part. But for me, the value that I get out of the car, that's the perfect part, because I don't have any backfires or any misfire or something like that.
Understand. So your car, so you are conscious that your car is losing a percentage of original, but you prefer to do that in benefit of performance, usability, reliability.
Yeah, but the question is, what is original? Looking at my car, the chassis number, that's in the 911 with a narrow body. But if you look closely, in the 70s, they have used parts from the wide body, and they just modified the car already in the 70s, a couple of years after it was produced. So what is the originality here? Where does it start and where does it stop? Is originality always there, how it comes out of the factory? Or
yes.
When do we start to talk about these things? Because talking about other cars that has been built, rebuilt, modified right after they came out of the factory, or even by the factory a couple of weeks after, is this still original?
So do you think that there are different types of modification, and feedback classifies those? There are modifications which are according to periods. Mm-hmm. Those are modifications which were done by the factory, okay, or by the community during the period, and therefore they can be done these days without penalizing the authenticity of the car, okay? And maybe there are other modifications which there are outlaw in a way that they were not done in period, not done by the community in the period, but there are modern modifications looking for a performance which is only available these days because new technology. Would you agree with this kind of, let's say, classification of modifications?
Well, yes, of course. It's again these things, adding your personality and adding on the history string something new. I don't think there's something wrong about that because it has been done. And why should we stop there if you're like that? If you think that I have changed the gearbox, for example, because it's much easier shifting gears with this gearbox. And driving the car regularly, you want to have easy shifting gears. You don't want to search all the time for the gear.
Clearly.
And also, it's better for the gears as such. So, but going to extremes like RWB, for example, this is an extreme thing. But maybe in 20, 30 years' time, we will talk totally different about the same topic because it is then history. Now it's contemporary, but in 20, 30 years' time, he's the famous guy who's not believing that maybe he, as a brand, will add his note on history of the timeline. And that this will be an authentic thing because it has been in the community, in the culture. It's always a cultural thing. Maybe.
I understand. FIBA in the chapter of Turin says that modifications are allowed when you are looking for reliability, like your ignition, okay, or maybe the gearbox, as long as you can put back the original piece. Is it something which you have followed with your car, or is it something that, I mean, you don't care we're modifying the car? The possibility of retrofit to the original situation.
To be honest, no, I never thought about that.
Okay.
When I removed the seats, when I removed the back seats or changed the seats, changed the door panels from the normal to the RS style things, the only thing that I had in mind was how do I want the car to be? And I never thought about the possibilities putting it back in the original or the condition that I bought the car, which already was modified from some parts because it had to be done in the last 40, 50 years already. It has a history. It has a history. You cannot go back all the time, from my opinion. It's really, really hard. It demands a lot of work. A friend of mine, Simon Kitson, is doing it regularly. Getting back to original paint, all these original things. There's also the value in there. Totally agree. That's really, really great. But I never thought about that with my car, with my personal car. No.
When selling the car, I don't know. I know we don't want to sell our cars, right? But there will be a point. I mean, that the cars will continue in this world. Do you think that these modifications will penalize the value? And here is the monetary value, okay, the financial value, obviously not sentimental. Do you think these modifications will actually penalize that value, or actually will help increasing it?
Well, the value of the car is just the value that somebody is willing to pay for. So, talking about a 300 SLR for 135 millions, is this the value of the car? This is the value that somebody was willing to pay for. Is this the value of the car?
Market value. Yeah.
Would I sell my car for the same amount? Yes, I would, but that's not the question. What is the value of the car? For me, it has already a value because it's a family member. My son is 8 years old. I bought the car when he was 1 year old. He knows the car in and out. So what's the value from his point of view of the car? And I'm asking, shall we sell it? He says, no, I like the car. So there's a totally different perception of value.
Subjective.
And for me, this was never a question, will it diminish or decline the value of the car? I have removed the AC. The first thing I removed was the radio because I'm listening to the engine. And everybody told me, no, you can't remove the AC. It's an original part. It has been with the car since ever. I'm not using an AC. It's just, for me, it was just weight during that time. And I thought, it felt better. And as soon as I removed that, for me, the car was driving better. So I had more value in the car for myself.
More performance, more value. Mm-hmm. It's a 911. They build how many thousands? A lot.
A lot.
So it is a mass production car. If you were facing a limited series car, okay, would you have approached the modifications the same way?
Probably not. For example, talking about 930, Porsche 930, the turbos, the charged ones. Modifying them for me would be difficult because these are really icons from my perspective. I'm just talking about my personal perspective about these cars. I would not change them. I have a lot of respect when people are taking them and modifying them and having the courage to do that because it's of value, cars of a high value. But these special editions, I would not change them.
You will not touch them?
No,
okay.
I would not, because these are some landmarks in the history, and it would be strange from my point of view to change them too much. But this is a normal car from my point of view, and it was already modified from some parts back and forth. I have the whole history I have the contract from 1973.
I love it.
Well documented, everything.
I love it.
Of course.
I love it.
So I knew exactly what happened to the car, but
so we can trace all the modifications from original condition
yes.
to today, and we can explain why, which modification was done to the car, and therefore, let's say, originality, modifications, and history, they go together.
Yep.
Okay.
I have everything from this car is really well documented. And talking about value again, people are approaching me sometimes when I'm at events, Cars and Coffee and all these events, and they tell me, yeah, this car looks different because the modifications I've done, they're not so obvious when you just have one glance at the car. And that's also what was my idea. These modifications are not hard. They're not jumping in your face. But it adds something from my personality, hopefully, into the car, on the car. And people approaching me and say, oh, it looks nice. I don't know why, but it looks different and nice. I like it.
It looks balanced.
It looks, that was my idea, a balance. Giving it more balance, giving it more into my personality. And I invest a lot of time and research. What can I do? What would be nice? Change things back and forth. And talking about value, maybe there will be some point in the future where I'm considering selling the car, and the person who wants to buy the car probably sees the same value that I see.
Yeah, they can see the history of the car as well, and they will say, oh, I'm buying the car, but also the history of modifications and the purpose of the modifications. And
also talking about history, modifications, when I'm buying a car, I spend a lot of time talking to the owner first. I'm not opening the door, I'm not looking at the engine, I'm not a technician. But I spend a lot of time understanding the person that owned the car for the last 5, 10 years or even longer. Because from my point of view, it tells a lot about how the car has been treated, what was the idea of purchasing the cars in the first instance, then also talking maybe about modification, changes, all the history, all documented things, why you have done that, what happens there. And that is also something that I really value when buying a pre-owned old car, because that's important.
I agree. You need to understand, you never should make an offer on a car without understanding what happened with the car. And in my opinion, you should not trust 100% on what the owner said if there are not actually evidences, papers, history, supporting the talk, I would say.
But that's one thing, the documents, but it's for me also the personality of the person selling the car. Is it a trustworthy person? Because you can fake also documents, you know that.
Yes.
You can fake histories and all these things. And sometimes it's not on purpose, but if you have a 50-year-old car, it's likely that there have been a lot of owners in between.
Yeah.
So having documents, this is rare. But also all the information's got not passed from one person to the other. And you need to find a trustworthy person who can say, okay, in good faith, and I believe.
Even where the car is stored, you know, I like to see where the owner is keeping the car. This is for me says a lot.
Yes.
Whether the owner respects the car or not, you know, etc. You know, Markus, I have the 308 GTB 77. It had 6-7 owners, never restore. Okay, I'm not modifying the car because it's limited series. You know, in comparison with the 911, I mean, big difference on that. But I do consider my car a survivor for all of that, okay? And also a driver. I drive the car, you know what? How would you classify your car?
That's a really tough
It's
question.
a daily driver?
It is a daily driver, classic car. I would not say it's a resto mod or an outlaw, because from my perspective, being an outlaw, it needs to jump in your face. You need to see that, okay, that's modified. That was never the intention to do that. It's just my car.
Okay.
I like it. It's my 911. It's my interpretation of driving an iconic 911.
Fair enough. You are much younger than me, and I do have concerns, worries about how the classic car hobby is going to in terms of prices, affordability for the young people. Any advice for the young generations to jump into the hobby when approaching the first classic car?
Yes. Only advice I would look for is taking the time and waiting for the car being there and then having the right feeling, okay, that feels good. I have looked into so many cars before I bought this one. Sometimes I was just sitting in there and jumped out immediately because it doesn't feel right. And never look for the value, how the car value could increase, decrease, something like that. Because that won't give you any joy from my perspective, because I like driving the car.
You need to buy the car that you like. I agree.
And what we see at SwissWorks, because we're selling our products from Australia to North America, around the globe, I see a lot of car communities around the world, younger generations, more female customers are buying old-timers from themselves. And what I see there is they're using those cars more and more as daily drivers. That's what I see, that's their value, and having an old car with substance, with a history, maybe something they can connect to. Their uncle had this car, the dad has a car, mom had this car. Sentimental values and all these things. Yeah. But they're not hiding those cars. They're keeping them and adding something to the car because they're using them as daily drivers, maybe having a second car that they're using during winter times or, I don't know, longer distances. And that's really nice to see that, and also how people interact with these cars in all these different communities.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I mean, I think the classic car community is safe in a way that the young generations are taking over in a healthy way. And I see challenges in terms of pricing. I agree, you should buy the car which you like, never as an investment. Do your research about the car and buy the car within your budget, but buy the best car within your budget. Never go bargain, because otherwise you will have to pay a little bit afterwards in hidden issues.
You have always to spend at least 5 to 10% of the purchase price in the first 6 months.
You need to put it on a bucket, because it will happen. It will happen sooner or later.
Talking about modification, maybe you want to have different rims, wheels, have a steering wheel, because you need to also get to know the car. Just having 1 or 2 test drives won't do the job. And maybe you're thinking, okay, the steering, there's too much room. I need to change something on the suspension or something like that, because you don't like it, because you want to have it differently. or you need to replace something because it's just old. It's old cars. You never know when something will break. It's just an old car. There's no fortune teller telling you that. So it's also a different approach of driving the car. It's not comparable to modern cars in any way.
I agree. They are much better.